name's Isabel. I'm a product owner at DSW. We're an independent assessment organisation who've been approved by the government and appointed by your employer to carry out endpoint assessment for the Senior Compliance and Risk Specialist standard. In this short video, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what's assessed, how it's assessed, who carries out the assessment, and hopefully that will help you to feel confident and well prepared for your assessments and give you a great experience and hopefully a positive outcome as well. Your apprenticeship standard was designed by a group of employers, and they came up with the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they feel somebody needs to demonstrate in order to be competent in the role of Senior Compliance and Risk Specialist. Our responsibility as an assessment organisation is to carry out that endpoint assessment and assess you against those knowledge, skills and behaviours to confirm that you are indeed competent. Your entire endpoint assessment will be carried out by a single assessor. That's somebody that's appointed by DSW. They're an expert from your industry, but also an expert in carrying out workplace vocational assessments. They're there to put you at ease. They aren't there to catch you out in any way. And the questions they ask will be based on the work that you've already put forward as part of your portfolio and your presentation. The knowledge, skills and behaviour statements have been designed by employers. These include a broad range of organisations who employ senior compliance and risk specialists within their business. You can be assured that these knowledge, skills and behaviours represent the cutting edge of the profession. They'll provide you with the expertise you need to perform at the highest level within your job role and across the industry. So those 46 knowledge, skills and behaviours are combined into what we call pass and distinction descriptors. The pass and distinction descriptors group together, providing you with a clear performance indicator relating to different themes. So for example, products and customers, strategy and planning, communicating and influencing. There are 16 pass descriptors in your apprenticeship programme. It's these pass descriptors you're going to be assessed against in your endpoint assessment, so it's really key that you get to know these descriptors well. As well as that, you might be aware you can achieve a distinction grade in your apprenticeship. There are an additional 7 distinction descriptors that you'll need to meet, as well as the pass criteria. Because this is a brief overview, we won't go into too much detail about those here, but there is a lot more detail in the DSW toolkit, which is available via your training provider. In there you'll find more detailed guidance around what's expected to meet each of the criterion, how it's assessed, and there are mock resources in there to help you prepare as well. Your entire endpoint assessment will be based solely on these pass and distinction descriptors in the toolkit. Rest assured, there's no trick questions and the assessor will do their best to put you at ease. Now we know what's being assessed, let's have a look at how it's going to be assessed. We've got 2 methods that make up your endpoint assessment. The first is a professional discussion based on your portfolio of evidence, and the second is a project report, presentation and questions. Both of these will take place once you've gone through Gateway. Let's start with your portfolio of evidence. This will be developed over the on-programme phase of your apprenticeship and will be put together before you reach the Gateway stage. What we're asking for is that you pull together examples of the best bits of work that you've done during your apprenticeship. We recommend you begin collecting evidence as early as possible. When you reach Gateway, you should select your best pieces of evidence and create a showcase. Your training provider should support you with this. In the toolkit, there's a mapping document, and you'll work with your line manager and the coach at the training provider to help select the best pieces of evidence and find where it maps to those pass and distinction descriptors in the referencing table. The referencing table covers all of the descriptors that are being covered in the professional discussion, so you'll put evidence in against each one. Once you're ready for Gateway, you'll submit that to DSW electronically and our assessor will review it and use it to prepare questions for the professional discussion. Your portfolio needs to contain a blend of evidence. It could be written statements, witness testimonies from your line manager and examples of real work that you've done. The professional discussion itself takes place between you and the assessor. It's the same assessor that's reviewed your portfolio, so they've already got a good idea of the work that you've been doing. It's a really good opportunity to explore that in a bit more detail. The assessor is going to be looking for evidence for any of those past descriptors where maybe they weren't quite met in the portfolio. So that's where they'll start. They'll satisfy themselves that you are competent and that you've met those outcomes. And they'll use it as a bit more of a deep dive. So this is a really good opportunity to get your character across, get your personality across and your passion for the work. The discussion is up to 90 minutes and it takes place online. It's usually Zoom, Teams or WebEx, but if you do have a platform that you prefer, please let the assessor know. Chances are we can accommodate that. The questions will be based on your portfolio, so that's a good thing. There's no curveball questions. You know what they're going to be based on, you know what the pass and distinction descriptors are, so preparation here is really key. They aren't going to ask any questions that are a surprise. As long as you're familiar with the learning outcomes, you've got your notes with you, you can bring your portfolio with you as well, so you can make sure you're really well prepared for it. When you're asked a question as part of the discussion, you can refer to your own notes. It's a discussion rather than an interview, so the assessor might ask some questions to open up a dialogue, prompt a discussion, and maybe probe a little bit more into some of the things that you've already been talking about, but it's very much led by you. We'll move on to your project report now, and this is done in 3 parts. First is context summary, and this is submitted at Gateway. This outlines between 1 and 2 projects that you've been involved in that have been completed on programme. You might have worked on the projects as part of a team, however, it's essential that you demonstrate how you individually met the grading criteria. The context summary is a maximum of 300 words and it needs to outline what you did, what your role was and what the outcome was. You'll need to provide evidence to back up what's being said in the context summary, and there's a template for all of that in the toolkit. The context statement also includes a referencing table so you can map it to those pass and distinction criteria. And your training provider and employer will need to sign that referencing table. The context statement and evidence aren't assessed, but our assessor will review it and use it to set a project title and scope. From then, you'll have 8 weeks to complete your project report and your presentation materials. The project report is a maximum of 3,500 words and it needs to be accompanied by the project referencing table. The presentation will be based on the project report and it's going to critically evaluate the outcome and results of the project. The presentation is going to take place at least 2 weeks after you've submitted the presentation materials. You can't make any changes to your presentation materials within that 2 weeks, but it's a really good opportunity to practice delivering your presentation. The whole assessment is 60 minutes, but ideally 20 minutes of that is for the presentation, so practicing timings ahead is a really good idea. After the presentation, you're going to be asked 8 questions. There are some sample questions available in the toolkit, so you'll get a good idea of the type of question you're going to be asked. And again, all of the questions are based around the grading criteria and the content of your presentation. So as long as you know those well, none of the questions should be a surprise. We've got lots of resources available to help you get ready for your assessments. Your training provider and DSW work closely together to understand the requirements when it comes to your endpoint assessment. If there's anything you don't understand, your tutor or coach is your first port of call. They're there to help and support you. Here are a few tips which apprentices have found useful in building a strong portfolio or project. The first is to start early. Build in regular checkpoints, review potential evidence as the programme progresses rather than waiting until the end to decide what you might use as evidence. Pick out the best pieces from what you've collected. You don't want something brilliant to get lost in a mass of evidence, so quality over quantity. Make sure anything you submit is there for a reason. The second is use naturally occurring evidence wherever possible. Evidence that covers real work situations will really bring your portfolio to life and make it a much more interesting read for the assessor. Familiarise yourself with the pass and distinction criteria. There is an amplification document in the toolkit which goes into a lot more detail, explains how they can be met, what's expected. The key is to really break down the pass and distinction criteria and make sure you're covering the whole thing. Look at the wording, look at the difference between a distinction and a pass. The verbs used will indicate the level of depth that you need to go into, and the amplification will explain the concepts in a lot more detail. Go through your evidence, see which areas might be potentially weaker. You can use multiple evidence sources to cover one criterion if you need to. The most important part is that each descriptor is covered in full, so don't be afraid to put in a few extra pieces of evidence if you feel they're needed. Practice, practice, practice. There's a lot of mock resources in the toolkit. Doing mock discussions and presentations is a really good way to calm your nerves, make sure you can get all of the points across you need to within the time that you have, and it makes you more comfortable discussing your evidence. So when you actually go into that live assessment, it will feel less daunting. Make sure you stick to the word limit. Anything over the word limit won't be assessed, so be really mindful of word limits on your project report. And finally, use the resources in the toolkit, use the templates that we've provided, and if there's anything that you need, anything you're unsure of, speak to your training provider. I'd just like to finish by wishing you the best of luck in your endpoint assessment and in your career in compliance. We hope you have a great experience and a positive outcome. Thanks for watching.